Mother slept with my fiancé. Now they want back in my life and meet my newborn child after years of silence. God. Where do I even begin with this mess? I was with Dickhead, my ex-boyfriend, and from now on, just DH for nearly 5 years. We met in college and instantly clicked. We never had a fight, nothing like that. I've always been the level-headed type who seeks out communication first, and that had always worked well for us. After we finished our courses, I landed a job close to my family, so I moved back, with DH coming along. He eventually found a good job too, and for a while, everything seemed absolutely perfect. Then, 3 years ago, just after we'd gotten engaged, it was all his idea. By the way, I had no clue he even wanted to get married. I came home early one day. I walked in to find my mother and DH having sex. If I could have burned the eyes out of my head at that moment, I would have done it willingly. 4 months afterward, I had nightmares, horrible, vivid ones of him taking her doggy style over the kitchen table. Long story short, I threw the engagement ring at him, shoved my crying mother away, and bolted out of there. I immediately told my father, only to find out, much to my horror, that he wasn't surprised at all. Apparently, my parents had been discussing the idea of opening their relationship for a while, and had just gone through with it. My mother hadn't disclosed who she intended to partner with. My dad actually suggested that I should really think about whether monogamy was right for me. He asked what the harm really was in my mom having a little fun with DH. You have to understand, my dad is the sort of person who gets totally absorbed in whatever lifestyle or philosophy he reads about, like the time we were younger, and he decided we should all live like hunter-gatherers and learn to hunt because he'd read up on it. Hearing my father excuse what had happened was almost impossible to stomach, but at the end of the day, whatever they chose for themselves was their business. The real problem was that my dad had basically endorsed my mother's betrayal of me. This is the point where I got lucky, thanks, in no small part, to the personal finance advisor I saw during college. I was the only one saving for a house and had a nice little stash put away in my account. So I left. No note, no text. I handed in my notice at work, called my landlord and paid whatever it took to get out of my lease. I left all my furniture and anything I owned behind, because honestly, I didn't care. I just grabbed a bag of clothes and essentials, got into my car, and drove away. What came next was the best road trip I've ever had solo, traveling across the states, completely free. I eventually found another job on the West Coast and settled there. I met my husband, fell in love all over again, and we had a small wedding. Neither of us wanted anything flashy. Now, after a hard pregnancy, we have a beautiful 3-month-old son. Throughout all of this, the only connection I kept to my old life was through my sisters. They snuck out to attend my wedding because I didn't want my parents to know anything about my new life. They'd only try to crash it and ruin something else for me. My sisters were the first to know about my pregnancy, too. And for full disclosure, my husband knows everything, every detail. But now there's a problem. My younger sister confessed to our parents. She told them where I am, that I'm married, that I've had a baby. Since then, my parents have been sending me letters and making phone calls, pouring on a guilt. Every message, every voicemail, it's all about how much they miss me, how they've missed out on major moments in my life, how they want to know their first grandchild. Just an hour ago, I even got a voicemail from DH, sobbing about how he thought I was dead or something, how devastated he was, and how much it hurts to find out I've moved on. My husband is an absolute rock. He told me that whatever I choose, he'll back me up 100%. But right now, my resolve is starting to crack. Sometimes when I look at my son, I wonder if maybe he should know his other grandparents. My in-laws are wonderful, but I keep thinking, shouldn't my son know my side of the family, too? This is where I need advice. Do I stay strong and keep them out of my life, or are they right? Should I have handled things differently? I just don't know what to do. Honestly, it was terrible. She launched into this tirade about me being too unforgiving, lecturing me on the sacredness of family and accusing me of robbing our parents of a chance to be part of my life, and my son's too. For once, though, I didn't let it eat at me. I told her to fuck off, hung up, and then just cried for ages. I never saw this shit coming. It hurt almost as bad as the first explosion. To this day, I'm baffled by whatever happened to her. One day, she apparently woke up and decided I was the villain for simply wanting a normal life, free from our parents' toxic influence. That's when my husband became my anchor. He scooped me and our little one into the car and drove straight to his parents' house after explaining the situation. His mother wrapped me in so much warmth and kindness that I felt like I could finally breathe. She took every chance to watch our son so I could get some rest, which I desperately needed. During this brief sanctuary, my husband reached out to my older sister, let's call her B, to feel her in all the madness. Everything exploded after that. From what he relayed, B wasted no time. She stormed over to confront our younger sister, M, and things got heated fast. So much so, B decided to cut M out completely, a huge blow, considering B had helped fund her college. But it didn't end there. Fueled by anger, B actually drove all the way to our parents' house and walked in to find them packing suitcases, ready to fly across the country. They'd already bought plane tickets, planning to ambush me mid-week. B unleashed on them, but even she couldn't convince them to cancel their trip. Before leaving, she managed to pry some details about their flight out of them, which she passed on to my husband. He decided to keep quiet after my earlier breakdown. He figured the less I knew, the better. So he stayed back at the house while I remained safely at his parents' place. When my parents finally showed up, my husband answered the door and flatly ordered them off the property. That sparked a vicious argument between him and my father, which escalated until my dad tried to force his way inside. That was the last straw. My husband called the police. When they arrived, my father twisted the whole story, accusing my husband of imprisoning me and preventing me from seeing my family. I only found out after I received a visit and call from the local police to follow up on his claim. That's when I learned just how far my parents were willing to go. They'd actually come all that way just to get at me and my son. In the end, my parents headed back east after failing to get close to us, but the harassment only ramped up. We've received at least 8 legal notices, all demanding access to my son, which, thankfully, our lawyer says are going nowhere. But that's not the worst of it. We've endured 4 separate visits from CPS and the police, triggered by anonymous calls making wild accusations, everything from us being unfit parents to me being an abused wife. Our lawyer believes it's all a calculated attempt to manufacture a record for any future court proceedings. And maybe it's just paranoia, but I can't shake the feeling that they've hired a private investigator to watch us. B is still urging me to stand firm. She's going through her own version of hell, too. She's had 5 police visits this month alone. One even accused her of running a brothel, of all things. I guess pushing back has driven our parents so far that they'd rather tear our lives apart than accept we want nothing to do with them. At this point, we're seriously considering moving anywhere, as long as we can put this nightmare behind us. Even my husband is getting exhausted by the unending drama. We're still strategizing, weighing every possible legal safeguard to keep them from finding us if we go through with it. It's soul-draining. The saddest part is knowing this isn't about me. It's about my baby, about my parents' obsessive need for control, the refusal to let go of either of us. Some days, like today, it just feels like the future is an inescapable pit of lawsuits, insanity, and never-ending battles. Right now, I need encouragement or advice from anyone who has walked the stormy path before, because for the first time, everything ahead of me just looks like a bleak tangle of legal fights and toxic games I never wanted to play. Update 2. 2 weeks ago, my phone buzzed with that horrible little chime. I didn't know it could make an alert that an AirTag was traveling with me. I was pushing my son in his stroller to the park and thought the universe was just inventing new ways to mess with my heart rate. I turned on the app, followed the stupid little dot, and my husband and I took the stroller apart on the sidewalk like lunatics. Nothing. Back home, we went through everything with scissors and a knife. It was in the diaper bag, stitched under a layer of the lining, wrapped in Scotch tape. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I handed the bag to my husband and told him to get in the car. The officer at the station wasn't dismissive, which shocked me. He took photos, took the device, filed a report. He said a detective would follow up because this wasn't just a prank, this was stalking. I nodded along and kept stroking the top of my son's head until the movement made him drowsy and then still. We went to my in-laws after, because that's where I function best now, around people who don't make me choose between sanity and survival. My mother-in-law put a hand on my shoulder and I folded in it into it like a tent in a windstorm. The detective called 2 days later. He asked if I could come in. The AirTag was active long enough and often enough that they could tie it to an Apple account. He didn't say the name right away. He just slid a paper over the desk with C.A. on it, my mother's initials. My husband did speak. He said, very quietly, "We're getting the order today." He wasn't kidding. Our lawyer had already filed for a restraining order, but that was the day a judge signed the temporary one, ex parte, for both my parents and DH. No contact. No surveillance. No third parties. No loitering anywhere near our home, our jobs, my in-laws, or our son's pediatrician. The clerk stapled the packet together and it felt like someone had finally put my life in a folder I could close when I needed to breathe. That night the pediatrician's office called. A nurse I'd never spoken to sounded rattled. Someone claiming to be my father had phoned twice, asking for my son's vaccination record since the parents were not in a position to make medical decisions. They'd refused and flagged our chart. I added a passphrase to everything, "Doctor, pharmacy, insurance, daycare waitlist. My son's name felt like a door I had to keep locking. If it had just been the AirTag, maybe I could have told myself my parents had hit their ceiling for insanity and were done. But my older sister B blew that delusion up within days. She texted me a screenshot from a family group chat that I wasn't a part of because of course there's a family group chat where I am the topic and not the participant. It was my father, saying they'd found a short-term place 10 minutes away so they could be in position and work around the legal nonsense. My mother followed with some hearts and a picture of a hideous yellow couch. He posted a photo of the outside of a bland, beige condo with a timestamp that, when I cross-referenced it with a Google search I absolutely should not have done while nursing, turned out to be an Airbnb property less than 12 minutes from our house. I called our lawyer. She filed to have the temporary order served at the Airbnb. Meanwhile, M popped up in my messages with a wall of text that started with "I am so sorry" and then did a gymnastics routine of blame and pleading that made my eyeballs ache. She said she had no idea about the AirTag, she didn't know they were moving out there, she just wanted everyone to talk like a family. I told her we were only talking through lawyers now. She sent me a voice note crying. I turned the sound off and put my phone in a drawer. The serving itself felt like something from TV. A process server, who looked heartbreakingly like the dad of one of my college friends, delivered the papers to them at the Airbnb. 10 minutes after that, DH left me this email with a subject line, "I am his real father." He wrote that the timing lined up, that he needed to know the truth, that he was ready to step up. I sent the email straight to my lawyer. She wrote a single, devastating paragraph with the words defamation and harassment and presumptive paternity and cease all contact, effective immediately. DH replied with, "I didn't mean it like that," plus a broken heart emoji. I blocked the address anyway. Remember the detective? He called again. He'd tracked a second AirTag. This one was under the plastic lip inside our car's rear bumper, taped above the exhaust where road dust caked around it like frosting. He asked if I'd been hearing any other beeping or seen any alerts. I said no, I don't ride in the back of the car much anymore, because our son hates his car seat and I get carsick. He was quiet for a second and then said, gently, "We'll pick it up. Don't worry about it." I worried about it all day. Then I worried about the day after that. The first violation happened that weekend. A package showed up on our porch with no return label, just a cartoon duck sticker where a name should have been. My husband slid it open with his thumb and pulled out a little knit cardigan the exact shade of my mother's favorite mug, and a phone. It looked cheap and clunky, with one of those sticky pop sockets that say "Laugh, Laugh, Love." He turned it over. No SIM card, battery installed, powered off. When he plugged it in the kitchen, it auto-answered on the second ring. The number had no caller ID. Somewhere, faintly, a woman breathed into her own paranoia. We let it sit on the dining table and ring like a cursed thing until it stopped. The police took that at 1, 2. At this point, my husband's job called him into HR. Someone had sent an anonymous complaint that he was violent at home. He told them everything, sat down with his manager, and handed over copies of the restraining order and the police reports. His boss, a man who normally only expresses emotions about sales numbers, put an actual human hand on my husband's shoulder and said, "We've got you." I didn't know I was holding my breath about it until the sound came out of me like a puncture. B keeps sending me fragments from the other side of the circus. She's got a cousin feeding her screenshots, a neighbor dropping her notes about my parents knocking on doors. Apparently my mother is telling anyone who will listen that I'm married into a cult, that I've been brainwashed, that my husband isolates me and keeps the baby from his blood family. She sent my high school best friend a message on Instagram begging her to stage an intervention. My friend forwarded it and added one sentence, "Your mother scares me." I wrote back, "Me too." The hearing for the restraining order turned into a 3-hour stomachache with a court seal on it. My parents showed up looking like church. My father did that perform et have calm thing where he smiled at the judge like they were going to golf later. My mother cried into a tissue and dabbed at eyes that have never, ever held me the way she cradled a piece of paper. Our lawyer laid out the AirTags, the attempted medical record phishing, the Airbnb address, the package with a phone, the CPS calls, the police reports. My parents' attorney said words like overzealous grandparents and cultural differences while my mother stared at me like I had drowned us both. The judge's mouth went tight in a way that made me want to hug her. She extended the restraining order for 3 years. She included it, my son by name. She said that any further attempts at surveillance or third-party contact would be addressed with the seriousness it deserves. She also recognized the AirTag tracking as stalking behavior. When the words hit the air, something in my spine unclenched. We moved 3 days later. Not states this time, just across the city, to a place with more trees and fewer lines of sight. My in-laws ran interference like it was a military operation. My father-in-law parked his truck in our old driveway and moved it around every few hours. My mother-in-law stood in our kitchen with a Tupperware army and guarded us while we packed. We did it fast, at night, quietly, with the baby napping in a wrap against my chest, tiny sweat spots pressing through his onesie as I stuffed our lives into boxes labeled with code words that made us laugh even though nothing about this was funny. The first morning we woke up in the new house, the sun came through eucalyptus leaves and made the baby's hair glow, and I cried over a bowl of cereal because there was a lemon tree in the backyard and I didn't know why that felt like hope. 2 things since then that feel important enough to write down. 1. M showed up to B's apartment last week with a suitcase and the splotchy face she gets when she's been crying too hard in too little time. B called me on speaker and told me M wanted to apologize for real. M sounded like someone was standing on her chest. She said our mother told her she'd replaced me after I left and that maybe the wrong daughter was the mother after all, and suddenly, all of M's righteous fury made sense. They'd fed her a story where she could be the hero if she just played along with the script. M said she wanted out. I told her that if she meant it, she could start by sending B everything our parents had said in any chat or email that involved me or my son. She did. In those messages, my father describes as our ally and my mother wrote, and I will never unsee this, when he sees the baby he'll understand what he's missing. I read that and put my face into a towel so I wouldn't scare my son with the sound I made. Shoo, DH was picked up for trespassing. Not at my house. At my in-laws. He showed up there in the afternoon like he was arriving for a barbecue and started wandering around the side yard. My father-in-law found him looking in the window over the sink. He called the police and DH sat down on the patio furniture like a guest who'd arrived early. When the officers escorted him off the property, he cried about a misunderstanding in family. He was charged and released because of course he was. But there's a report now. There's a record that doesn't have my name on and is the terrible person who called. I'm writing this from the floor of our new living room. It still smells like other people's paint and citrus, and there are boxes pretending to be end tables and a laundry basket pretending to be a coffee table. My baby is on his back, batting at the air like there are invisible planets he can't swat into orbit. My husband is reading a book next to him in a voice that sounds like a lullaby to me now, even when he's reading about something boring. B is coming over later with a doorbell camera, she swears by. M is sleeping on B's couch tonight because she said she doesn't feel safe at home, and for the first time in months, home means my parents' house to me and not mine. Update 3. The doorbell chime in the new house is prettier than the old one. 3 soft notes like a music box clearing its throat. It went off in the middle of a Tuesday, sun stuck like honey on a lemon tree, and a woman I didn't know stood on our porch with a foil-wrapped casserole and a kind of smile that belongs to people who practice them in a mirror. She had a little wooden cross on a string and introduced herself as being from a welcome ministry. I asked which church. She blinked too long, said Grace Fellowship, and when I didn't move, she added, your mother said, and then clamped down on the rest of the sentence like it was a tooth she could hold in. I closed the door, locked it, and called the detective. He asked us not to touch the dish and to see if she would talk to an officer. She did, right there on our front step, because not everyone recruited into a bad idea understands they're in one until someone with a badge says the word harassment out loud. She handed over her phone. The texts were from a contact saved as C, a bubble parade of instructions and hearts and a photo of my house from down the block. I recognized the yellow couch in the background of one text, the Airbnb, slumping like a bruise. The officer took the casserole like it contained toxic waste. Our lawyer filed for a violation the same afternoon. I thought that would let the pressure out of the boil, but it whistled. The next morning, a sedan I didn't recognize slid past our driveway slow enough to count lug nuts. 2 hours later my phone rang. A number I didn't know and a voice I wished I didn't. He said he'd filed a claim and that I should expect papers about the baby. I put him on speaker. My husband reached across the counter with the same steadiness he uses to hand me our son, pressed the button to end the call, and emailed our lawyer instead. The hearing landed so quickly it felt like tripping. We sat on one side of a stale courtroom, air that smelled like dust and coffee, and DH sat on the other with a man in a suit who couldn't keep his tie straight. He kept looking at me like the spectacle of me breathing was an apology I owed him. Their argument boiled down to bad math and a worse understanding of my marriage. The judge's voice had the gravel of someone who has heard too many families grind themselves down for sport. She read the line about presumptive paternity like it was a lullaby and then said, "This court will not be used as a cudgel," and dismissed the petition before DH could get to the part where his lawyer tried to say love makes biology. She awarded us fees. DH mumbled something about not meaning it like that, the same apology he writes like a form letter, and a bailiff made eye contact with him the way people do with skittish horses. B called while I was nursing later, speaker on, her voice too sharp for the tiny, odd animal asleep against me. "You need to see what M sent me," she said, and then the screenshots came through so fast my phone stuttered. A notes app full of plans like they were writing a heist film. Farmer's market Saturday? You can accidentally bump into her, and have tip from church bring by a hot dish so it seems normal. A voice memo I almost didn't press play on because the subject line made my stomach turn. It was my mother's voice, tinny and close, telling someone that the tag worked until she got wise, at you tuck it where love lives and she'll never think to look, and I had to stand up and walk into the backyard with a lemon tree and the wind chimes because if I listened to the rest in the house I think my walls would remember it. The detective did not flinch when I sent it. He said, "Thank you," like I'd handed him the missing screw to a machine he was trying to build. On Friday night, our doorbell camera caught my father taking a tape measure to the sidewalk in front of our house like the curb was a puzzle he could solve into proximity. He didn't look at the camera. He pretended to be considering landscaping while he counted softly to himself. When the cruiser rolled up, he tried to melt into a neighbor's jacaranda and then pretended the tape measure had floated into his hand by accident. He left with a folded citation he tried to hand back to the officer like a business card. Our lawyer called it textbook. I called it a knot I couldn't undo between my shoulders. The next thing did not come wrapped in anything. I was at the farmer's market with my mother-in-law because she wanted blueberries and an excuse to push the stroller while he slept. There was a man leaning against a light pole with a camera pretending to be a phone. It's funny, the little flashes your brain keeps as souvenirs from fear his shoes were too clean for our market and he flinched when a toddler sneezed near him. We bought peaches we didn't need and circled, and when he lifted the lens toward my son, my mother-in-law straightened her spine to its full, terrifying matriarch height and said, "No. She has a way of putting a period in the air." He looked at the ground and said he was with the HOA newsletter. "We don't have an HOA." He left fast. He did not run. I took a picture of his license plate anyway, which felt like taking a picture of a man's mistake. The detective called me back before the peaches were paid for. The car was a rental from the airport. The renter's name belonged to a pie with a website with stock photos of men in trench coats who don't exist in this climate. On Monday, the detective had the contract retained by my father, signed 2 days after the restraining order hearing. "We're moving this to the DA," he said, and the way he said it made me stand very still in the kitchen so I didn't rattle anything. They arrested my mother first. B texted me, "They're here." Then, "She's crying." Then, heartbreakingly, she asked where M was. They picked her up outside the Airbnb, hair curled like she was going somewhere that required someone to look at her and admire the effort. My father made a speech to no one about civil liberties and then tried to shut the Airbnb door on an officer's foot. He didn't get cuffs that time, just a second citation and a look like he'd used up his grace. My mother's charge sheet said words like stalking and violation of a protective order. When I read those with her name attached, I felt a piece of the last 3 years click into a box and close. It's not over nothing this messy ends with a single snapping sound, but it was the first time the world called what was happening what it was, not a family disagreement or a misunderstanding dressed up in tears. M moved into B's guest room the same night. She showed up with a duffel bag and the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 6, ear chewed to a flag. She said our mother called her a traitor and a lost girl and then, like a knife slide, I picked the wrong daughter. I didn't know phones could carry the sound of someone's heart cracking, but they can. M forwarded me an email chain where DH offered to help with legal fees if it means access, and my father replied, "Your family." There's a point where rage gets cold and very efficient. I forwarded it to our lawyer and then made dinner with my husband in the quiet insistence of 2 people who refused to let a meal be stolen too. 2 days later, a man from the DA's office called to tell me there'd be an arraignment and I didn't need to attend unless I wanted to. I didn't. B went and sat in the 3rd row with a sweater even though it was too warm and texted me that our mother looked small for the first time she could remember. Conditions, fines, a calendar with dates on it that belong to people who get to say what comes next. The DA also filed a motion to modify the order to include something about electronic surveillance that read like a net. We are not NOV enough to put our faces in the sign and call it finished. The doorbell still sings. The neighbor 2 doors down told me my father knocked and asked what time we usually walk. The pediatrician's office flagged our chart again because someone tried to schedule grandparent vaccine updates and used the wrong birth date. We planted basil anyway. My husband set the pot on the kitchen sill and said it would like the light there. I caught myself hum to the baby without meaning to. There are tiny mercies. DH's employer sent him to another city for a temporary assignment, which feels like the corporate version of being told to take a walk. My husband's boss mailed me a baby onesie that says future union rep, and I laughed out loud for the first time in weeks. B dropped off a doorbell camera with a cheerfulness that felt like armor, and M sat on our new rug and held my son while he discovered his own feet with the reverence of a pilgrim. Tonight the house smells like lemon and garlic and dryer sheets. The boxes are losing their jobs as furniture, and we have a real coffee table that a man we don't know delivered and left on the porch without asking me questions about my soul. The baby made a noise that could have been ba or could have been a hiccup learning ambition. My husband read him a book about a very determined bear, and I watched the shape their two heads made next to each other and thought, not for the first time, that I am building something no one who didn't help lay the bricks gets to knock on. The judge's order is another brick. The Da's motion is a brick. The lemon tree is a ridiculous, glorious brick. I am exhausted down to the part of me that makes cells, and still, when I lock the door at night now, the click is quieter in my chest. Update 4. The basil on the kitchen sill put out this one ridiculous leaf overnight, bigger than my thumb. I brushed it with the back of my knuckle while I waited for the kettle to click, and it left my skin smelling like someone trying to remember summer. The doorbell sang its 3 little notes and my stomach dropped the way it does now, despite the pretty sound. Certified mail. My name printed too dark, like whoever typed it was angry at the keys. Inside, the State Department. I didn't know envelopes could have a temperature, but this one felt cold all the way down my wrists. They were notifying the custodial parent under the Children's Passport Issuance Alert Program that an application had been submitted for my son. Post office across town. Applicant, grandparent. The name wasn't printed, just the code my lawyer heard like a conductor hears a car horn and said, "We need to call now." The woman on the line had a voice like a neat desk. She confirmed there had been a D-11 submitted with a D-3053 attached consent from the second parent, notarized. My husband made a sound with his teeth I'd never heard him make. The signature on the consent form was my name, misspelled in the old way my mother used to write it on permission slips. The address listed for me was my parents'. The witness had presented as a grandmother with a church ID and a smile. They hadn't issued the passport because I'm in CPAP and because our lawyer had already sent over the restraining order with our son's name underlined. The words fraud and federal made a little drumbeat in my throat. The clerk said, they had video. She said someone from their fraud unit would be in touch with a detective. I put the letter in the freezer for 5 minutes because my chest needed to cool down to keep working. The detective did the thing where he doesn't FL into the phone, he just waits for you to finish and then fits the new piece into the machine he's building. "We're adding it," he said, and later, like a magic trick, a judge signed the modification and the DA folded the attempted passport into the same packet as the AirTags and the pie in the casserole. My father's name was on the notary line as attending. The church lady's number matched the one we'd given the officer when she brought the foil dish. It's like they've been trying to knit a net out of their own fingerprints. They got a search warrant for the Airbnb. I didn't know you could do that to a rental somebody had filled with human-sized stacky and bad lighting. B texted me from her car outside, 3 patrol cars and a woman with a badge handing the host a page with the word warrant at the top like the first word, in a language you don't want to learn. I wasn't there. But I've been in that living room a dozen times in my head because the detective called after and told me, in cop speak, that they'd seized multiple devices and printed materials of interest. When I asked what materials meant, he paused like he was checking a box and then said, day-by-day itineraries. Addresses. Your in-laws' birthdays. A copy of your son's birth announcement from the hospital portal printed from a photo of a screen. He didn't say how much of me was on the floor in there. He didn't have to. I went out under the lemon tree and threw a lemon over the fence into the green belt and listened for its small thud. It sounded like an answer to a question I didn't know how to ask. You can't file all the motions in the world and still be ambushed by something stupid. We were driving back from the pediatrician ear infection, tiny pink antibiotic, smell like fake grapes when the doorbell camera pinged my phone with a person at the porch. My father stood there with a garment bag over his shoulder like he was coming to take measurements for a fitting. He didn't knock. He bent down and slid something flat under the mat like a trick. The cruiser turned the corner as he was halfway down the walk. There's a way he holds his hands when he lies palms out, like he's about to bless the lie into truth. The citation turned into cuffs this time. Violation of the order with a DA's motion in his pocket. He smiled at the officer like they were both tired of my theatrics. The officer did not smile back. B texted me a photo of the thing from under the mat. It was a copy of the grandparents' rights statute pulled from some website with Bible verses on the sidebar and highlighter on phrases like best interests and extended family bond. He'd underlined ongoing relationships so hard it tore the paper. The arraignment for my mother turned into 2 gates on a calendar and a line of people with faces folded in half with boredom. I didn't go to that one either. B did. She wore the sweater again. She likes pockets for paper and stress. She sent me a picture of the docket. Stalking. Violating a protective order. Conspiracy. My mother pled not guilty. Her lawyer said community ties like she was crocheting a blanket. The judge set conditions that sounded like a cage made of Wi-Fi, no electronic monitoring devices, no hiring third parties, no digital contact, surrender of her passport, a curfew. The DA asked for surrender of firearms for both of them. My father's mouth did a little please shape and then flattened. He hunts with a devotion. He likes to put bones on mantled. The judge didn't care about his collections. Our lawyer leaned into the mic on the table and said, "Thank you," so softly only the wood probably heard it. DH tried a new angle and somehow found a way to trip on it anyway. An open letter appeared on a Facebook page he must have set up in a lemon's time on the tree. A photo of my son cropped close enough that it could be any baby, but it wasn't. The pie did good work for the wrong people. DH wrote about love and blood and systems stacked against men. He wrote that God has a plan, which was rich coming from a man whose plans had never extended past his own zipper. He named my first name and my married last name. He named my neighborhood. He used the word stolen. It took 4 text messages from friends before our lawyer had it pulled down. Then she filed a permanent injunction that used the word publication like a cudgel and attached the photo of my door with the doorbell camera in the frame. DH DM'd me on a new account after, didn't mean it like that. It's like he's learning a single line to a play and keeps repeating it to see if the audience laughs. M is going to therapy. She called me from a bench outside the clinic and described the therapist's office in loving detail: the rug, the couch, the plant that looked like it's pretending to be a tree because she's still more comfortable narrating a room than her own heart. But then she said it, I believed them because it was easier to be the daughter who fixed it than the daughter they'd already broken. I sat on my kitchen floor with my back to the cabinets and let that sentence live in the air. Later, she forwarded a voice memo my father left her because he can't resist the sound of himself on tape. He said the words "produce at aisle in 10:30 ma. And just have the baby look at me." He said baby like it was a safe I keep in my purse. The detective called it overt planning. The judge called it remand. My father spent 48 hours in a place where nothing belonged to him. He called my mother from the inside and the DA played it for the court at the next hearing. They both said quiet things that made the prosecutor's mouth go flat again. The judge didn't lift the curfew. She added an ankle monitor and a warning that read like a bedtime story you tell to keep the wolves away: one more violation, and the night will not end where it began. The day the State Department sent the letter, our lawyer slid a different packet across her desk. "Safe at home," she said, like it was the name of a game we could finally say out loud. "California will let you put your real address behind a Sacramento P.O. box and a program coordinator who takes your mail and becomes a bridge you don't have to walk across if you don't want to." The paperwork was ugly and beautiful. Ugly, because my child's name next to the word confidential made me taste mel. Beautiful because the state was offering to stand between us and the people trying to pick our locks. We signed with hands that didn't shake until later. The church called our in-laws, because of course one of the people my mother used as a delivery system for her plans also had the decency to feel wrong about it. The pastor left a message for my mother at the sheriff station where her mail gets routed for now. He said their welcome ministry was not a private investigator firm and that they'd be reviewing boundaries. My mother will hate the word boundaries so much she'll probably try to staple it to the air. M is nested at B's now like a bird rebuilding with stolen ribbon. B bought a second kettle because she says grief drinks tea. They sent me screenshots from the family group chat. I'm still not in even though the family got small. My father told a cousin that they're brainwashing M now too. He said they like we're a cult. I looked at my husband rinsing blueberries in a colander and thought, sure, if a cult is a man who reads board books in different animal voices and remembers to change the laundry before it goes sour. A man in a suit who belongs to the DA came by our house to go over the impact statement for the next hearing. He sat on the edge of our couch like he was afraid he'd break it, and listened to my husband talk about the day he stood on our porch and told my parents to leave. He listened to me describe what it felt like when I saw C.A. on a sheet of paper that might as well have been a dagger. He didn't write much down until I said, "They put a phone in a box with a sweater that smelled like my childhood kitchen." Then he put his pen on the paper and wrote for a long time. We drove past the old house because you can't always control the roads you end up on. There was a for lease sign staked into the grass at a long angle, and for a second it looked like a white flag. My mother-in-law sat at our current kitchen table and wrote recipes in a spiral notebook like a general planning a gentle war. She taped the doorbell camera to the new front door with the concentration of a surgeon. My father-in-law installed motion lights that make our yard go bright when a raccoon or a bad idea gets too close. Their love is the practical kind that comes with anchors and screws. The last thing snuck in on a Tuesday with a sky the same empty blue as a too clean bowl. The detective called, video from the post office, he said, and then, do you want details? I said no and then said yes. He kept it clinical, two older individuals and a woman in her 20s. The notary. The grandmother in a cardigan, I can't picture her even if he didn't describe it. A man with my father's way of acting like the counter belongs to him. They handed a photo of a baby that was not my son, because the PI had taken pictures from too far away and babies are just faces until you know them. It still made my knees itch. The die stacking charges. The word felony is now a piece of furniture in our living room. It's there even when you aren't looking at it. The basil has 3 leave now. The baby laughed so hard at the sound of the dog 2 doors down sneezing that my eyes got weird and hot. We squeezed a lemon over pasta and the juice leapt onto my wrist and stung in the place I forgot I had a cut. B came by with a package of outlet covers and a bottle of wine in a paper bag like we were 21, and M held my son and told him in a voice that had corners that she was sorry she'd believed what she'd been told. He grabbed her hair and smiled like mercy. We have dates on paper now that belong to other people, arraignments and hearings, and a check-in on an ankle monitor that leaves a raw line on a man who has always thought his skin was a passport. We enrolled in safe at home in the little P. Oh. Box number looks like an incantation when I write it, something that keeps doors shut and windows latched even when you sleep. The judge's pen will move again. The DA's office will call. The detective will add one more page to the folder that has my name on the tab like a bruise. Somewhere, my mother will tell someone she loves that we did this to her. Somewhere, my father will measure another sidewalk that isn't his. Somewhere, DH will switch cities and try on a new apology like a jacket. Here, the lemon tree knocks on the fence in a little wind. The basil leans toward the window like a yes. Our son says ba and then ba again with a certainty that makes my husband laugh into his shoulder. The door locks with a softer click tonight. It's not over. But something like a door I didn't know I had is closing on hands that don't get to live here anymore.